Hi, I'm Daphne from Daps Makeup, here to give you the quick tea on luxury makeup, and today I'm excited to talk about the new Hourglass Ambient Lighting Edit Unlocked the Lotus Flower palette. Now there are three palettes. Generally speaking, they tend to try to gear towards light, medium, deep. And so of course I got the one that's supposed to be geared to the deep shade. Now, if you buy from Hourglass, you can choose, you can mix and match what colorway. There's a dragon one this year and an evil eye. So even if you're not really into the lotus flower, you can switch it up. But if you buy from Sephora, then you have to buy the designated colorway. But for all intents and purposes, this is the lotus one, and this has the 6 deepest shades. And this year, 5 out of the 6 are new shades. A lot of years, there's only a couple of new shades, so it's great that the overwhelming majority of the shades are all new shades. We always look forward to this every holiday season. Once a year, that's the one thing from Hourglass that most of us are always looking forward to getting. Now, I will say this year, I was kind of debating because I've gotten this is now my 4th one. Yeah, I've been buying them basically every year, and I was kind of like, do I need to get it this year? But of course I did. Because their formula is so good. Now, of course, the big issue for anybody who is of my skin tone or deeper is an issue that's been ongoing, that we're always have a major concern with the fact that these palettes, generally speaking, are not really geared to deeper skin tones. Now, they have been slowly getting better. I do feel like with each year, these last couple of years, that they have been getting better. For a lot of us, not as fast as we would like, but I will say it does seem that they are slowly progressing and providing more shades that are more applicable to those of deeper skin tones. And this year, this is the big deal that they have gone, this is the deepest bronzer that they have come out with. Now, is it deep enough to truly bronze anyone of my skin tone or deeper? That is the real question. Because I will tell you personally, in all the previous years, I've always used the bronzer as my finishing powder. I've never used their bronzers as bronzers. And so I went into this year not confident, despite all the cloud about it being a deeper shade, that this might be it, that this might actually show up. I went in this still quite hesitant. I bought this knowing that most likely for me that I was going to end up using it as a finishing powder as previous years. I was prepared for that. Let me just say this. Hoping that it'll be a bronzer, but preparing myself that it is going to be just a finishing powder. But we're going to find out. I'm going to let you know for real, is this or not. I will tell you, it is deeper than the previous palettes. So we have hope. This might potentially be a bronzer for some of us. Besides the palette, I actually bought one of their brushes, their dual-ended brushes. They are also famous for their brushes. It's something I've always had my eye on and never pulled the trigger, and this year I decided to pull the trigger. Now, although there are 3 colorways for the palette, there's only 2 colorways for the brush. So they have the evil eye and then the dragon. So I got the dragon. So I got the lotus palette, but the dragon brush. So I'll also let you know what I think about the brush. Is it worth getting? Because these things aren't cheap. I mean, the palette is $90. The brush is like $50. So these are not cheap. But, one reason why, to consider getting the brushes are these pan sizes, are not always conducive to a lot of brushes that we tend to own in our collections, but these brushes are perfectly sized to fit into these squares. So you got that. Now, I've never really been a big fan of having dual ends because, like, how do you store this? So this is my first real dual brush, because that's what's made me hesitate all these times, but I decided to pull the trigger. So for me, just FYI, like, I keep my brush in the box actually, because I don't want this, like, I don't know what to do with it, because I don't want to put it with all my other brushes and then have like the brush like touch the bottom of my brush holder or get dirty. I don't know. So, but I will tell you also about the brush. So you know, I'm going to let you know what I think about this palette, but I'm also going to compare it to my other palettes, because I own the snake, I own the tiger, and I own the OG one. Let me tell you how old it is, so much so the back is rubbed off. Okay, so I will let you know how this one also compares to all the previous years. So yeah, we have a lot to talk about. So to start things off, I always love to show demo videos. So I actually have 2 demo videos, and I have a couple of pictures for you. So let me even set the stage a little bit. Like I told you, I went into this kind of skeptical about particularly the bronzer. I decided to buy it in store. So I went in store, and I even swatched in store. So in store, I'm gonna show you pictures over here of the swatches that I did. I did swatch all 6. If it looks like I only swatched 5, no, I swatched all 6. The 6th one is the one all the way to the right next to the deep blush shade. The bronzer is my skin tone in terms of my arm. Now, I will tell you, my arm is lighter than my face, so we'll talk more about that. But in terms of my arm, the swatch was so I'm showing you the picture in different lighting. I did it in store, you know, under the direct light, not under the direct light. I did it as of it in my own home in natural lighting. So you're seeing it in different lighting, and it's gonna be hard. If you look close enough, you can see the swatch, but it's hard because it's my skin tone, which I can already tell you that's an issue. So I'll ultimately let you know if this ends up bronzing me, but off the bat, I can tell you based on the swatches, clearly it's not gonna bronze those who are deeper than me, okay? So with that in mind, when I was doing these swatches, when I went to use it for the first time, I already put in my head, this isn't gonna bronze me. And also the lighter blush, you know, so looking at this palette as well, you know, so I already had my concerns about the bronzer. I already put in my head, you know what, this is gonna be a great, you know, just all over finishing powder, but not feeling like this is going to be a bronzer. And then I also had my concerns about this blush, because the swatch was looking pretty light, and I'm like, ooh, I'm not sure if this is going to show up on me. So I went in with reservations, particularly of these 2 shades. I was very excited for these 4, but had serious reservation for these 2 shades. So you're going to see the demo video of me doing a look that I came up using all of the shades. And I'm going to also already give you a heads up. I came out with it saying to myself that the lighter blush and the bronzer don't show up on me. And so, you know, I posted on Instagram because, as I've told you guys before, I always post ahead of time on Instagram swatches. I make my makeup looks. I do makeup of the day looks that I post. And a lot of times in my posts, I'll also give you my, you know, first impression. So I was already having a dialogue with those of you who follow me on Instagram, and I was letting you know, give my heads up like, ooh, this blush and this bronzer aren't really showing up on me. And I had another follower who has a similar skin tone, if not deeper than me. And she was like, you know what? It actually does kind of show up. You know, try it again. And I was like, you know what? Let me go in there, you know, with better intentions. I'm going to try different brushes. I'm going to make sure to use much denser brushes. You know, I did, that first look was more of like a full glam look. And I was like, you know what? Let me do some no makeup looks or some light makeup looks. And let's try this again. And so I did some looks on my own, and doing no makeup looks, I had a better appreciation for those 2 shades. And so then I wanted to do another demo video with you guys where I did a more no makeup look. And so you'll get to see how these products work for a full glam look, and then how it looks for a no makeup look. Now this look that you see here, I started off with that no makeup look. So actually what's on my cheeks and my bronzer is the Hourglass. Now afterwards, after I was done taping that for you, I decided I wanted to try out some new eyeshadow and lip products from the new Dior holiday collection. Couldn't wait to use it. So for today's look that you're seeing me, I got the Hourglass on the cheeks, but the eye look clearly is not Hourglass. But I'm just going to show you just a video of me applying the Hourglass on the cheeks for a more no makeup look, and then it was just off camera. I kind of amped up the look for today. And don't worry, I'm just now getting into the Dior. By next week, I'll get you another video out. I'll try to do multiple looks, and I have a couple of products besides these two. So I have many pieces from the collection that we'll talk about. But for this Hourglass, yeah, so you'll see these two demo videos, and then we're going to come back and talk, and I'm going to give you my true honest opinion about this palette. I'm going to compare it to the other Hourglass and let you know, particularly for those who are of my skin tone or deeper, is this palette worth it? Is it as they advertise? Let's find out. I'm really excited to try the Hourglass Lotus flower palette for the first time. Now I have swatched this palette, but I have not used this palette. So just from the swatching, I already know off the bat, this is not a bronzer for me. It is literally my skin tone. So this is like an all over powder for me. This is gonna be a good finishing powder, I think, especially under eyes. I decided to still go with the Givenchy setting powder. I really wanted to set my face, tone down the glowiness, because this is better as a finishing powder. But I'm still gonna try to even kind of set a little bit and finish where my liquid bronzer was in this area with over here. So like I said, I don't see it as being a bronzer, and surprise, surprise, no it is not. But it works great to just set my face because it's literally my skin tone. So for all of those who are thinking this is gonna be a bronzer, it's not. I'll even afterwards, I will break out a bronzer brush and show you once again. It's not bronzing, nothing, but it set my liquid bronzer well, but it is literally my skin tone. This is my skin tone. Let's actually take this and just see how it works on my eyes in the transition. So you can see it's very much like my skin tone, maybe a little bit warmer, you know, it might be just slightly deeper than my skin tone. These are highlighters, but I'm gonna just try to use it as eyeshadow for this look. So I'm going into the more pinkier shade. I'm going gold in the inner corner. Whew. Look at that shine. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So I finished the eye look off camera. Here's a closer look. So the shimmers are from the Hourglass palette. But now let's use it for what it is meant to be used for, on the cheeks. So I'm excited to try the blushes. Now from the swatches, I already know this is gonna be beautiful on me. This one, I don't think it's gonna work, but we're gonna try. So we're gonna start with that one first. And yeah, it disappeared. Yeah, this is not camera tricks. It's not showing up. Well, you know what? The one nice thing is, at least it's not ashy. It's just not there. I'll even try a denser brush just to make sure. All right, let's try a more denser brush. I'm even looking off camera just to, because it can look different for what you see from me. It's big. I mean, there's barely anything showing up. Nothing worth talking about, honestly. So this shade is a no-show on me. So if you are my skin tone, this will not show up on you. If you're lighter, obviously, then this might be a beautiful shade on you. But on me, nada. But let's go into this one. This one I do know is pigmented, so I am excited to try that one. Switching back to my go-to soft cheek blush from Sonia, you can see that it is picking up, and that one is showing up. And so I'm taking my time to just build it up. But as you can see, this definitely shows up on my skin, and it does look beautiful. I'm also just looking. Now it's time for the highlighters. We actually have two highlighters. We have a golden traditional highlighter, and this one I guess I could either use as a highlighter, or maybe it could be also as a glowy blush. So we'll see. Let's start with the golden one, and I'm excited. This is my first time using an Hourglass brush. So I'm going to use this tapered end for the highlighter. Like we talked about, we used it on the eyes earlier, but now let's apply it on the cheek. Wow, I will fix that. I'm going to just put the excess on this side. I will blend that out, so don't worry. I know it's looking crazy. I'm going to do it off camera. I'll just put some down the bridge of my nose. So highlighter wise, gorgeous. So let me, to kind of help blend this out, I'm actually going to use the finishing powder here. So I'm using the lighter one, and I'm going to use the other end of the brush. So you can see the pickup there. I'm going to go under my eye there, and it should also help to magic. So when your highlighter has gone a little bit too crazy, finishing powder is beautiful. Not only does it help with the blurring, and so you can also just see the side with the finishing versus non-finishing. You can see this is a much smoother, everything is much more blurred on the side versus this side, and it really helped out with the highlighter. So I think that's what Hourglass is best for, is honestly their finishing powders are beautiful. Now I'm going to just show you again that this bronzer does not bronze. So I'm trying to pick it up here. There it is on here. The problem is it's literally my skin tone. So this works great as a finishing, just an all over powder for me because it's literally my skin tone. But as you can see, it's not bronzing. It's not bronzing, it's just finishing. But I do love how everything is blurred. So, but just so that we use everything, I'm gonna put a little bit of this and kind of use it on top, use it as a blush topper. And I think that works. So I think that actually works with the whole look. So there we go. All right, so we're back at it again with the Hourglass palette. So the last time I did more of a full glam look, and when I did that palette, you know, I was pretty harsh, particularly on these two shades of bronzer and the lighter blush. Since I did that look, and that was my first time ever using the palette, since I've done that look, I've done more no makeup looks on my own and try to give a, you know, a better, I want to give a fair chance for these two to really show up. And I was able to better appreciate those two powders in particular when I was doing a more lighter makeup look. And so I wanted to do a lighter makeup look on camera with you guys, just so that we can give a full rounded opinion about all the shades, but in particular these two shades. Okay. And I do not have any cream bronzer contour products at all. So it is just skin tint, concealer, and setting powder, and that is it. All right, so now let's see how the Hourglass really shows up now when with this very minimal makeup base. On a side note, before I get started, I just want to get a closer look. I'm kind of feeling like this is a developing hard pan. And probably, I'm not seeing it with the others really, just this one. And maybe because of the time that I tried to use it to like kind of set the cream bronzer in the past. So I might off camera kind of scrape this off a little bit because I want to make sure there's nothing that is gonna impair the you know, the fullness of the pigmentation of this, but I just wanted you guys to be aware of this before I do this. So I'm gonna make sure to just scrape off any layer on top because I wanna make sure that I give full pigmentation to the bronzer. But just be aware that this can happen. I think particularly if you try to then, you know, use it on top of any cream products. Okay, so I scraped it off, so no excuses. I also brought out 2 bronzer brushes. I typically use my Sonia G Nude G Pro. I also brought a Tom Ford. I might use on either side just to try different brushes. I just want to give this bronzer the best chance possible. So let's go in there. And there we go. There we go. So here we go. So I think you can appreciate that. So I hope you can. So nothing on this cheek and on, it's gonna be subtle, all right? But there we go. So, you know, it's giving me a something something. So it is showing up, especially like I said, I'm using a light base. I'm not doing a full coverage blush, but there you go, okay? Let me go in, I just wanna switch brushes. There you go. I think you can still appreciate it. So I don't, you know, because I want to make sure I give Hourglass its due. This is their deepest shade that they've come out with, and I don't want to totally hate on the brand. Like I said, I'm certainly not the deepest shade, and so that doesn't mean this is going to work for everybody. And all my skin products right now are leaning very light and golden, so you can appreciate this better. But for those with deeper skin tones, this might not show up as well. But there we go. So I think you can appreciate the bronzer here. Now let's go for the blush. And particularly, I want to go for the light blush. So let's give it a go. Going in the center. And so this is picking up. And like I said, hope you can appreciate this. It's going to be hard. Like this is not, I'm not going to act like, oh my God, this is such a pigmented blush. It's not. It barely shows up on my skin tone, but I hope you can appreciate it shows up a little bit. You know, in the last video I just acted like it didn't show up at all, and you know, granted, you know, brushes matter, what brush you use. Brush, this is my Chanel is what I use for my hard pressed dense brushes. So gonna go in this with the Chanel, and you can see it picks up. I'm telling you, this brush, these hard blushes, this is the brush to use. So here we go. I hope you can appreciate this. It's very subtle. It's very natural. But it shows up. But it shows up. So to complete the cheek look, I want to go into the highlighter, the deeper one, just because I feel like the last look I highlighted more of the golden one on the high points of the cheek. So once again, we're going for a subtle look. This is, you know, we're going for the no makeup look. And once again, I feel like I can appreciate it more off camera. But I think even on camera, you can feel at least there's a glow to my cheeks. So it you know, it blends nicely with the blush. It's very subtle, but if you don't want the high shine bling bling of the gold, the pink is more subtle. Now, to be honest, actually, against this blush, even this highlighter is almost overpowering this blush. So this is kind of best if you're really going for the no makeup look. Now that I've added the highlighter, I'm starting to lose the no makeupness of it. So why don't we just go ahead and add the deeper blush? I'll just use the Hourglass again, which is picking up nicely. And that way the intensity of the highlighter matches the intensity of the blush, because I don't want my highlighter to overtake it. But you can see the difference once I build up with the deeper blush, how it looks, and then they really pair well. So, you know, the gold will really obviously really pop against my pink cheeks, But if you add the deeper blush, they just pair well together. So you can use the pink truly as a separate highlighter or as a topper like I did in the last shade. But these two really do complement each other if you want a high shine. My cheeks are wow. Especially because the rest of my base and my eye look is so subtle. My cheeks are definitely the star of the show. Let's use lastly the finishing powder just to smooth things out. And it'll probably also help to calm down the cheeks a little bit so it's not going too high up on my face. This shade right here I just think is the perfect finishing powder. Particularly I like to use it in the same areas I would normally use my concealer. I like this kind of lighter tone face powder for that. And I just feel like it gives that finishing touch. It has a magic that everything just blurs once you add this. Like the look is not complete until you've done that. Now, I might actually now go off camera and just change my eyeshadow, put some lipstick on. I have some other makeup products that I wanna try out that is not part of this Hourglass video. Might be for a future video. From here I'm gonna go straight to my final review and I'll let you know what I thought after using this several times both on and off camera, what I think of the product. So if you see my makeup just looking a little bit different in the review, I just want to use some non-Hourglass products that I'm gonna use for a different video. All right, see you at the final review. All right, so I hope the demo videos were helpful to you. I hope you could actually see the products. That was like the one thing I was also concerned of, particularly with the second look. You know, because sometimes things get washed out on camera, so I hope it translates to you guys. But before I give you my final opinion about this palette, let's do some swatch comparisons to the previous palette. So what I'll do is let's break it down in different categories. So let's start with the quote. I'm doing air quotes for the bronzers for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's questionable that any of these deeper brown shades are bronzers for any one of my skin tone, period, regardless of how they label it. And second off, in some of these palettes, you're going to see they're going to label the brown tone shade as a bronzer. And some of these palettes, they actually label it as a finishing powder. But I'm still going to compare them anyway if it's, you know, of a brown tone shade, the deepest brown tone shade in the palette. So let's start with the newest Lotus. Let's go back here. And, you know, recognize these are powders. So trying to swatch is, you know, interesting. So I wanted to first show you with the finger, not trying to give you the middle finger, but just because it'll be easier to see the color, because as you can see against my arm, you can kind of see it a little bit, but you can see it just kind of blends into my skin tone. The light actually is helping for you to even see it. I think if I turned off, I have the ring light on right now. I think if I turned off the ring light, I'm not sure you could see it at all. But yeah, it's a little slightly darker than my skin tone, but barely. Okay, so let's go to last year's. Why not? They did label this one as a bronzer. Picking a different finger now. So let's go into there. As you can see, so I've never used, you can see why, I've never used this as a bronzer. I always use this as a finishing powder. So there you go. But definitely this year's is much deeper than last year's. Okay, now let's go into the Tiger palette. Now, interestingly enough, they do not label this as a bronzer. They actually label it as a face powder. Which actually I was happy that, like, I was like, stop pretending these things are bronzers for deeper skin tones. So I was kind of like, when they said it was a face powder, I was actually not mad. And the funny thing is, this is actually like, it looks actually deeper than last year's bronzer. But I would say this year's is deeper than this one. But they never said it was a bronzer. They always said it was a face powder. And lastly, I'm going to go into the OG one. This is going to be hard to pick up, this one. This very light one, believe it or not, they called it a bronzer. And this is what I mean, because they were at this stage trying to act like everything was universal, which clearly not. So I never used this as a bronzer. It was always a face powder for me. I'm using my pinky this time. There's not much left, so there you go. You can see how much lighter that is. So I will say this year's is definitely the deepest that they've done. So kudos to Hourglass for that. You know what, while we're here, just because, like I said, calling these bronzers, because a lot of these are basically like face powders to me, I'm gonna swatch some of the other ones that are, a lot of times are labeled as face powders. Now they're lighter, and for me, see, the thing is, when I do my makeup and use these palettes, the ones that they truly will call face powders that are a little bit lighter, I always end up using them for anywhere that I normally use concealer. So under my eyes, basically the T-zone, under eyes, here in the forehead and the chin. And that's where I tend to use it. Where the deeper one, I usually will do it in the rest of my face, to just kind of in the areas where I would put bronzer, but I'm not using it as bronzer, it's face powder. So these are the deeper ones that are supposed to be bronzers. For the most part, face powders. But let's go into the lighter one, the lighter browns that are truly labeled as finishing powders. All right, so we're gonna go back to Lotus. And so we're gonna go into this one, which they do label as a finishing powder. And you can see how it's basically the same, very similar to the original bronzer from the OG one. And you can understand why I had always used it. I mean, the truth of the matter is, you could see I had pan in that because I loved it as a finishing powder. I never deluded myself into thinking it was a bronzer, but I loved it as a face powder. All right. Going into the snake, I guess the closest would be this. You know, there's sometimes powders that kind of, you know, right at the edge between being a finishing powder and almost a highlighter. I'm debating swatching it here, but I'll just do it anyway because that's the closest on this palette. You could see how much lighter and golden. It's basically, I probably shouldn't have done that. It's more highlightery. It's, you know, so it is what it is. Then we have this one, and here's another one where, you know, has some brown to it, but it has some golden to it. It's not a bling bling highlighter. So a lot of times I can use this almost like a finishing powder, but it does have a luminosity to it. So it's almost like highlightery. Like I said, it's kind of on that edge, but there you go. But it's still finely milled that it works like a finishing powder, but it is a luminescent one. So it's not going to be like matte. Okay. And then I think then we're just coming back here. So this one I've always used as a finishing powder. It's light, but I can still pull it off in these areas because I like to a brighter neutral in this area. While we're here, this I never use. This is a finishing powder that obviously is definitely not for my skin tone, but just so you can see the kind of stuff that we had to deal with. So clearly not universal. All right, so those are all the bronzers slash finishing powders. Next, we'll move on to blushes and highlighters from the palette. So now let's move on to the blushes. So when it comes to Hourglass, like I said, I love their finishing powders. Bronzers, like I said, controversials if we want to call them bronzers. Now with blushes, even this can become an area of contention for those of us with deeper skin tones. Sometimes they're hits, sometimes they're misses. Let's go into it. So in terms of back to the Lotus, so we got two choices for blushes. So this year it is pink tone. All right, so we got a lighter and a deeper. Let me swatch both of them now. So I'm going into the lighter one at the top. And you can see, you know, how like, you know, why I would have some concerns about potentially it being ashy or not good enough for my skin tone versus the deeper one. You can see why I was excited for that one. So the difference is like kind of shocking. Now, I know I was kind of almost going chronologically backwards with when I was showing you the bronzers and the finishing powders. For the blush though, I'm actually gonna go a little bit out of order and go to the OG one just because the OG has a pink blush that would be closest in tone to the current. So I'd like to compare the OG one. So I want to bring that closest to the Lotus. So I'm gonna now swatch the OG one. Oh, good. I just want to make sure I don't go over. So as you can see, it's definitely lighter than the deepest from this year's, but you can actually say it's more pigmented, more pinker and pigmented than the lighter one from this year. So it's some kind of like, it's like more like in between. I will tell you, when I first got this one, I did not appreciate this pink one at first, because yeah, I was, you know, this is not pigmented enough to use for full glam looks. So I was like, this is clearly not made for those of us with deeper skin tones. Later on, as we'll discuss, when I started using it for more no makeup looks, I could appreciate this shade better. And so let me also, I'm gonna swatch this one. This one is kind of, I guess, on the blush side, blush slash highlighter. It's another, this is more peachy, but you can see it's very light. So there's always seems to be, most of the time in these ones, like a lighter blush and a deeper blush. So this year's the lighter and the deeper. And here we go with these two sets. I kind of almost feel like it would have been cool almost this year have the OG's deeper one as the light of this year's and then still have this year's deep. I don't know. Okay, let's go to last year's. Last year's, I love the snake. I loved this one. They went coral, and I'm liking the pink, but I really actually love these coral shades. I've been using this palette a lot for the blush. So we got a lighter shade, and the lighter shade still shows up. Now, yes, I do tend to use a lighter one, once again, if I'm going for a lighter makeup look. And then if I'm doing more prominent makeup look, then I'll go with the deeper one. But I still find even the lighter one here is still more pigmented than the previous light shades. But yeah, this is more for my light makeup look, my no makeup look versus a more full glam look. And then the Tiger. Now the Tiger is definitely pigmented. I will say I don't tend to use it as much just because now this is a personal preference issue. The orange, I just don't see myself grabbing to the orange as much, but it's definitely bright and shows up. It's just, obviously I got to be really in the mood for this orange shade. Now this was a joke. This was a waste. So I'm going to swipe it. As you can see, even though there's a little bit of red in here, there's a lot more white than there is red. So I never use this. This is not a blush. This I can't use. That is an ashy mess that I cannot use as a blush. But this one is actually a good blush if you want orange. We're almost done with the swatches. So now let's get on to the highlighters. So typically there will be one that's more golden and then one that is a shade that's very similar to the blush. I feel like a complementary pink or orange or coral, So I'll just do top. So we got the gold from this year's, and usually the gold is always a bling bling. You can always count on the gold highlighter to really like pop. And then we have in this one a pink one, and this one is going to be more subtle, but it does show up and it's very complementary to the blush. So this you can almost use it also as a blush topper, and you're going to see that same theme follow with some of the other previous palettes. Right, so now we're going into the snake. So of course there's always a gold, and then the more coral tone. So I mean the golds is not going to be much different. They might say they're different, but there's not going to be huge different than the golds, but obviously the corresponding, let's just call them topper shades, are going to be different with each palette. Now on to Tiger. Once again, we got a gold. And then just wiping my finger, then we have the more orange coppery. It's more of an orange coppery. So there's a little bit of similarity here, but trust me, this is more coral. This is more coppery orange. This is clearly different with the pink tone. One real highlighter, and this is going to be different. So all the previous highlights I was showing was very golden. This is icy. It's icy, but believe it or not, you know, lightly used, it's actually still pretty on me. I actually still kind of like it. So like if I'm in the mood to have a more cool tone look, then I can use this one, where all the rest are going to be very warm and golden. So these are the highlighters. So I'll say they never miss on the highlighters. The highlighters always shine bright, always show up, and normally work. So it's just a question of sometimes some of the blushes don't hit, and then it's a question, are the bronzers actually bronzers? All right, time to give my final thoughts on the palette and the brush. You know what, let's do the brush real quick. Let's just get it out the way. Okay, is the brush absolutely necessary? Of course, I would never say that. I would never say that. It's not cheap. It's $50, $50 or $52. So this is not a, you know, nothing here is going to be cheap. And I'm sure we all have blush brushes and highlighter brushes already. So I'm not saying this is an absolute must. With that being said, does it work well? Yes, it does. And they do fit perfectly nicely with the palette, which is great. In terms of the highlighter, and it's that perfect shape to apply the highlighter. I think it's great. Now, if you already have, which I'm sure you do, you already have a highlighter brush like this, then you don't necessarily need this one. The other end. So once again, I'm sure you have a brush that you use for finishing powder, blush, bronzer, all that. So I'm not saying this is necessary. I will say I do like this end because once again, it fits into the palette. As we get into the issue of the blush, and I'm going to get more into this in a second, but just to go there, this blush in particular is very light on me. It's hard to show up on me. You can't use like a Sonia G soft brush. You need a dense brush, okay? I'm not saying you need to have this one, but this one did work well, picking up the blush as best as it can be for me. So it's dense enough, fits perfectly, and shows up. Now, I was also showing that I have a Chanel brush that works fantastic. So not to say it has to be this brush, but I will say you need something dense enough to pick up on this, particularly if you are of a deeper skin tone. You can't have a big wispy brush to try to pull this off. So a dense brush like this. So I did actually like this blush, particularly for this blush. Now the shape is actually beautiful, that you can also like use the finishing powder, and I've used this under the eye and the T-zone, and it worked beautifully. I have other brushes that I like and I still like to use, like from Sonia G. With that being said, it is nice to have this in addition, that this also, it did work well for that reason. Bronzer, you can, I do still like the kind of, a bigger bronzer brush for myself. But I think this was particularly good for the blush and for the finishing powder when you need to get into smaller areas or to really pick up the product. So I will never say that the brush is absolutely necessary, but if you're willing to spend for it, I think it actually works well. It picks up the products well. You know, if the design you like, you know, and even if you don't like this year's, it's, you know, one, they have a traditional one that's just a brown hourglass if you want that more classic look that's available all year round. And then generally speaking, every year when they do a holiday palette, a lot of times they will have a brush that will correspond to the holiday palettes. So you can also wait if there's a year that there's a particular design that you fall in love with. So I will never say it's an absolute must, but I will say functionally speaking, it does work well. All right, now let's really get into it and give you my last thoughts. I think you can already guess at this point, but let's just summarize it and come to a conclusion, giving you the good, the bad, and the ugly on this palette. let's start with the good. Let's just get that straight out of the way. This blush, I love it. It's pigmented. It's a beautiful shade. It's pink. You know, I was wondering, given what I already have, do I need it? But I do like it is distinctly different from last year's coral or the previous year's orange. For those of us of deeper skin tone, the blush that we get is a true pink blush, and we haven't had a true pink blush from them that shows up on us. And so I do like that a lot. So this is a beautiful blush shade. This is a beautiful complementary highlighter. It can work at the high points next to the blush and look beautiful. You can put it on top of this blush and use it as a blush topper. It's lovely. It's subtle, but complementary and beautiful. This highlighter, I swear they never miss with the gold highlighters. So this shows up nice and bright on the cheeks. It works beautifully on the cheeks. And as you saw from the first couple looks, these both work also great on the lids. I'm not saying these are eyeshadows, but if you're in the pinch, you're traveling, and this is what you brought with you. Oh no, I don't have eyeshadow. These work lovely. Or you just want to do a quick look. You're running out the door to run an errand. You don't want to do a full eye look. These work great on the lids, inner corner. They are beautiful as shimmer eyeshadows as well. So I think they're great. Okay, finishing powder. Love it. That's my favorite thing about Hourglass is their finishing powder. I think they have top 2 best finishing powder formulas. I could even argue 1 or 2, I can argue back and forth. I absolutely love their finishing powder. And that's, I think, what's the best thing that they make. And this is a great shade for me. So if you're my skin tone, this is a great shade to use as finishing powder. I particularly love this shade, like I said, in my T-zone area. So I think it works fabulously. Even better than some, certain palettes. There's always one that I can use in every palette. Some palettes I love over others, but I'm actually liking this maybe even better than some of the other ones in the other previous palettes. Okay. Blush wise, what's my favorite? It would be between this and the coral. I really like last year's coral blush, and this is now a personal preference issue. I just love this shade a lot. But I am liking the pink, so I'm happy that I have both blushes. But like I might even, like particularly for under eye, I might actually like the finisher powder and the new one better. I might give a slight edge to the coral blush on this one, but that's a personal preference, but I do like the pink on here. Gold highlighters are equal with all the palettes, honestly. Okay, I had to get all those are the 4 best products that come out of this. Now let's talk to the controversial 2. Let's really break this down. Let's start with this blush. So for my initial video, I was quite disappointed, but I've come to appreciate it because it's all about knowing when to use it. So if you're trying to do a full glam look, it's not gonna work. Not deep enough. This is not deep enough for a full glam look. Now, when I do and I'm not even talking about even light makeup. I'm not sure this is good enough for light makeup, but when you're doing a truest of the sense, no makeup look, this is where it's actually nice. Here's the thing. So I gotta run out the door. I'm just putting a tinted, a skin tint, tinted moisturizer, tinted SPF, whatever your light coverage formula like you want to use. You add some concealer, maybe just a spot conceal or light coverage concealer in your T-zone. You set your face with a light powder. And when you do that, you'll look polished. Yeah, you're not trying to do too much, but you want to look polished. But even though it's light coverage and it's not the full, it's not full coverage foundation and concealer, even with light coverage, with that kind of a blank cut, if everything is so smooth, you lose dimension in the face, right? Even with light coverage. When you add this onto the balls of the cheek, it then provides a very just enough pink on the cheeks so that your face doesn't look flat. It looks quite natural. Nobody's going to think that you're wearing blush. Not at all. So you're putting it on not to look like you're wearing blush, to look like you have a natural flush to your face and your face does not look flat. All right. We've come to the bronzer. So I will admit that, like, when I first used it the first time, that first video, I went in there totally with my own biases. I went in there already with negative thoughts about it based on the swatches and my previous experiences with these kinds of powders from Hourglass. Based on the swatch on my arm and seeing it being the exact skin tone of my exact skin tone, and just knowing their history of never creating bronzers deep enough for us, I was like, I don't care what you call it, it's a face powder. And so when I did my first look, I treated it like a face powder. Now I did, and you saw, I did attempt to use it as a bronzer with a traditional bronzer brush later on, but it still didn't really show up to me. Two issues. Number one, in that first video, like I do normally when I do my makeup, I always will use a cream bronzer. And that day, I also purposely used the Makeup by Mario, which is the lightest coverage liquid bronzer. I did not use my normal stick form balm cream bronzers, okay? So even me using that, the Makeup by Mario, yes, I technically use a bronzer base first, but honestly, it's not the most pigmented. But I did use a base first. I think trying to put that powder on top of a cream or liquid bronzer, you're not going to appreciate the bronzer in here. It just can't compete. It just can't. If you're doing full glam look, it's not enough. This only works if you're truly doing a no makeup look. So when I've now used it just with a skin tint, it gives just enough pigmentation to be used as a bronzer. So they want to call it a bronzer. I humbly accept that it's a bronzer. I do recognize that it is deeper than what they've given us previously. So I will give Hourglass credit. They've finally given us a bronzer that for some of us of medium deep skin tones, we can possibly use it as bronzer. I think for most of us of medium deep skin tones, you can only use it for a no makeup look or light makeup look. If you do full glam, it's not giving enough. Like right now, you know, when I initially did what I did with you on camera and some of the pictures I showed you, when I was truly no makeup look, it was enough bronzer for me. Now that after I came off camera, you know, I've amped up my eye look, my lips, my cheeks. Now I'm looking and I'm like, I want my traditional bronzer. Like when I get off camera here, I'm gonna put a real bronzer on, but I didn't for the purpose of this video because I wanted you to see. Because right now, it's bronzing a little bit, but you're losing it. You're losing it. It's not holding up strong enough when you have a strong when you have a strong eye look. It's not enough. I'm not getting snatched in the cheeks, none of that. Okay, but for a light makeup look, it's enough, you know. And even right now, I have the skin tint. You're lucky. You even seeing this right now, the little bit that you're seeing is because I have the skin tint on. If I put a full coverage foundation, no. Okay, so it is not pigmented enough for a full glam look, but I will admit, fine. It's pigmented enough for a no makeup look if you are my skin tone or lighter. If you're deeper, I don't think it's going to work for you. Okay. And lastly, honestly speaking, as a bronzer, I can say yes, technically it works. As a formula though, whatever you want to call it, I feel like the formula is more of a finishing powder formula. We're calling it a bronzer because it's deep enough to be used as a bronzer, but honestly, I feel like the formula is similar to this, which is the finishing powder. You know, the fact that like I'm just opening up the old Tiger palette, and then we got the new one. So they're gonna call this one a finishing powder, but this one a bronzer. Honestly, these two, I will admit this is surprisingly deeper. It doesn't look like it, but swatching it, I'll admit that it is deeper. But formula-wise, I feel like it's like the same formula. So even though I might technically be able to use this as a bronzer, I'm still willing to use it as a bronzer for no makeup look. But otherwise, I will use this as a finishing powder because I think that is what Hourglass is best at. I think they have one of the best finishing powders, and I still think this works well for that kind of formula. I feel like it's almost like they took their finishing powder, made it deeper, and said, okay, now you can use it as a bronzer. But I'm like, it's like a finishing powder. It's not the same. You could tell the quality difference is different from a traditional bronzer. Because what's beautiful, what makes Hourglass beautiful, it has the most finely milled formula. So sophisticated. It just blurs the skin. I feel finished and polished. I don't feel snatched, but I feel finished and polished. And so I admire this formula. So my issues with Hourglass are not so much the formula, because I love this as a finishing powder. What gets us is when you start calling things bronzers and then it's not working as a traditional bronzer, particular for deeper skin tones. When you're making blushes that can barely show up, you know, going back to this Tiger palette, this blush I can never use. This never shows up on me. Luckily I can use this, but even this one is for lighter makeup looks. This one I can only use for lighter makeup looks. These don't show up on me if I was doing full glam. So it is what it is. We have to accept Hourglass for what they are to an extent. We have to accept their kind of formula, but we do need to keep pushing them to go deeper and deeper and deeper, because it's with them getting a little bit deeper and deeper every time, it also shows they can. It's just a question, are they willing to go the extra mile and do it, to be inclusive enough for all of us? Because we all deserve to enjoy this beautiful formula. They have a fantastic formula that everyone should use. And even though I am lucky enough to be able to use these two shades as finishing powders and potentially as a bronzer, I fear those who are deeper than me, that these don't work for them. And how does it work for them? And it's frustrating and upsetting. But with that said, if you are of a medium deep or tan skin tone, these will work beautifully for you. And so therefore it is worth buying if it is deep enough for your skin tone. All right. Hopefully you understand what I'm trying to express. Hopefully you get the point. Hopefully you found this helpful. No matter what you choose, if you choose to buy it or not buy it, as long as you found this video helpful for you. I've talked enough. Time to end this video. So I hope you've found this video enjoyable. If you aren't already subscribed, consider subscribing to my channel. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video, show you the next products that have come into my collection, which I can already give you a heads up. The Dior holiday collection. So I'll, probably by next week, you'll see a whole video on that. So this is my first look, but many more to come. And until then, I just hope you have a fantastic day. Bye.